Here we open on a bright and sunny afternoon in Steveston. Construction businesses are booming, with new buildings for a greatly increasing population. With our multicultural communities, Steveston embraces its colonial past, but with many historical sites to commemorate its past. But Steveston wasn't always like this.
We're first faced with the opening of the Gulf of Georgia cannery. This cannery was one of many that employed Asian immigrants. When Canada opened its doors to Japanese immigration, many young men known as the Nikkei left their homes to journey here. Soon after, a law was put in place, limiting the Japanese to 400 men per year, aside from family exceptions.
This was one of the villages where the Japanese resided. Many were built near fisheries, giving the Japanese quicker access to the docks from which they worked. Many held fishing licenses and owned fishing boats for their own use.
Together, they developed their own community. This was one of the first community centers that permitted Japanese inhabitants due to the fact that they built it. Following the success of the community center, the Nikkei raised money and put it towards building the first interracial elementary school, known as Lord Byng.
This led to Canadians embracing more of the Japanese culture, especially many sports and arts. They developed a kendo team, built a martial arts center, and even included sumo.
Living conditions for the Japanese were adequate. With running water and electricity, the community continued to flourish, even with all the racism and discrimination thrown upon them.
They had finally hit a peak in their solidarity with the Canadians, but as the saying goes, what goes up must come down. Devastation was about to strike, and the years that follow would become some of the worst that they had ever faced.
Members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Following this announcement, Tom Reed and Ian Mackenzie persuaded the Canadians to attack China and Japantown with the premise of them forming the Fifth Column, which was a group of spies for the Japanese. Although the Japanese veterans defended the populace against this attack, it seemed to further prove that the Japanese Canadians were dangerous.
The government began confiscating all of their property, even though the Canadian military and Royal Canadian Mounted Police deemed the Japanese Canadians as no threat to Canada. They then shut down all the canneries and burnt all the cannery-owned houses along the coast. With nowhere to go, the government forced over 110,000 Japanese immigrants into internment camps into the interior of BC and farms in Alberta. They then lived there for 8 long years in horrible conditions. Families were torn apart due to gender segregation, and many died due to diseases and malnutrition.
Furthering the discrimination of Japanese Canadians, the government restricted enlistment to 119 Nisei, who joined the Canadian Intelligence Corps, acting as translators for the Canadians. On April 1st, 1949, the ban against the Japanese was lifted, permitting the Japanese to come back into BC, but many didn't return, due to the fact that they had already settled in their new homes. Some did move back to Steveston and took occupations in the fishing industry. The community slowly began to grow, but never really fully reached what it was. They began to revamp the communal areas, and the culture of Japanese took full form.
Till this day, Steveston continues to flourish as a beautiful and multicultural part of Richmond. The injustices of the past have most definitely changed the population and values of Richmond, with the Japanese ethnic group making up as little as 2.5% of our population. It's sad to see what the long-term results of the internment camps have caused. However, the discrimination from the past has made our community very open to cultures and has taught us how to embrace others instead of pushing them away. Unfortunately, after doing over 7 interviews with locals of Steveston, we were shocked to find that the residents of over 30 years had little to no education of the past of where they were living. We proposed that Steveston's history should be taught in all Richmond schools as a way to both bring light to our past and respect and remember those who lost their lives in internment camp. Prior to this project, Steveston was just a pretty place for aesthetic photos and summer fun. But now with this knowledge of its history, we respect the land a lot more. It also makes it 20 times cooler. So thanks, Mr. Gapsey. We owe you one.